Well, I thought, well, I had some time on my hands um, from doing busy work around my property for a while, and the heat not really promoting the thought of going out digging in the poison ivy and the sweat. I decided uh, during the hot summer months, I'll put out videos that are a little bit more tutorial than they're just explorative, digging for bottles, and show you a little thing or two about what I like to do on my spare time. If you don't mind my cat walking in front of everything. Anyway, let's start out with talking about taking an ordinary plain bottle that probably would be overlooked. I dig these things up generally and leave them where they are or put them back in the hole for somebody else to find. But I get a lot of requests, and I've been doing this since I've been digging bottles, about, illustrating plain bottles with labels. And in the day, I looked frantically around for my labels that I have dug, believe it or not, over the years, and used them on bottles. Paper can withstand a lot, and if they're down deep enough and in a well dry and irrigated area, a paper label could survive for years, and I have found them. Let's talk about some of the condition of original labels on the bottles, and this is one of my earliest bottles. As a matter of fact, this bottle here will probably rate as my first bottle I actually collected. I was about 15. My parents were looking at real estate, and they were shown an old Victorian home, Hoosick Falls, New York. I decided to explore the house, and I climbed all the way up to the Widow's Walk, which was this tower in the middle of the house. In those beams, though, in between the ceiling of the upstairs and the roof of the building, there was sort of a crawl space loaded. And I do not exaggerate when I say loaded, from rafter to rafter, of boxes of bottles from the 1880s and 90s. This is actually older. This is probably an 1870s. It's a Scots emulsion. I got two of these, and the other one I don't know. It's in a box somewhere. And the other one has a label too. They're not in good condition. The labels just deteriorate over time. Unfortunately, I didn't spray this one, although it looks like I might have did a little bit of spraying the brick with some liquid glue to keep it on, but it hasn't helped much. But that's the act of Congress. It's pretty cool. And if you look at the color of the paper, it's important if you want to match historical labels or redo historical labels with the time period. This salmon paper was used quite often, salmon and black. The black stood out from that. Here's another original. Came out of an old attic. It's a little prescription pill bottle, and the pills are still in there. The little round things, they look like little tiny raisin seeds. Pills were that way back then, so they were put in bottles that had narrow necks. So this here is a prescription. I don't know exactly. I can't read it. It's just so old and faded away. So that's what the condition of what bottles with labels would be looking like if you just found them in the wild, like in a attic of an abandoned home or under a house, for instance. Now, the bottles that we're going to talk about here are refurbished with actually new labels. And what's important about doing this is you want to match the label with the type of bottle that you're going to put them on. In other words, for instance, it would be inappropriate. I'm not saying they didn't do that, but it would be inappropriate to put a cod liver oil bottle on an English ale bottle. And the other thing is putting the cod liver oil bottle from an 1870s bottle onto a ale bottle from the 1920s, which is this one right here. This bottle here is a good example of how to do this. It is an English ballast bottle, or, you know, ginger ale. Let's put them this way. The round, semi-round bottom. Probably produced in England. A lot of these were. You see this type color glass is a dead giveaway. American of that same period is right behind it. See the color, the difference in the blue and the green. And this is a mineral water bottle. Could be ginger ale if you wanted it to be, because they worked hand in hand. But I turned this thing into a champagne ginger ale. It says tonic on it. It's a real fancy bottle label. It's really a cool. If you found the original bottle, it'd be really nice, because it's champagne tank, and this says, you know, it is no sorrow for tomorrow. This was probably a ginger ale mixer, and this is the label that would go on this bottle exactly. So this is a perfect match. And when I put the labels on, these are printed off the internet, so you can get these labels for free off the internet. And if you have a technique of how to size them and all, you could even fit them to the exact way they fit on the bottle. Now, I distress my labels just so I want them to fit with the time period. I know that labels would not be pristine, perfect looking after 100 years of wherever they were stored, and if they were stored with labels. So I distress them once in a while. I put tears in them, and I'll doctor them up with watercolors to make the label look all. I didn't have to do much with this label. It came printed. I just tore it by accident on there, but it looks pretty good. That's where a tear might occur if it was bumping against another bottle or so. So that label is what should go onto this bottle. The other one is, as I said, this is this British English ale. This is a English label, and it may have not gone to this bottle, but it probably was a close relative to the actual bottle. That this is a 1920s English early machine made ale bottle, and it says stout on it. But what's the difference? This is a stout, so now I've turned it into a stout if it was not originally. But it works perfect with this, and the stress also adds to its authenticity. If you wouldn't want to pass these off as original. That's the other thing. I started this way back when I started selling at flea markets and bottle shows back in the 70s, and late 70s and early 80s, and right off the bat I was told that it would be blasphemous to pass reprinted label on a bottle and try to pass it off as original label on the bottle. You know, if you want to do that, it's up to your morality, but you know, if you're selling these and trying to make money off these things, you could jack up the price if you could prove that that's the label that came on that bottle, you know. But because this is, you know, an American standard beer bottle that probably had Budweiser in it, it's hand blown, of course, but it was plain. And there's billions of these bottles all over the place. Not as good in condition as this one is. A lot of dumps, you'll find these bottles, and they've been treated like, you know, no value. So they're thrown in dumps on bricks and broken and cracked. or the glass gets really sick. I'm lucky enough to have found this one in a forest, and there was nothing really around it to contaminate the glass, more sand. And this label works perfectly. This is the type of bottle that label would be on. Now, my last one here is these green mineral water bottles. These, if 9 times out of 10, you're going to find a lot of these in 1880s, 90s, and 1900 dumps, and they're usually English, not necessarily all the time. These are generic. Turn mold is also their one of their major characteristics about these type of mineral waters. They're usually turn mold bottles. That means they were turned in the shape of the mold. They were turned in there so there would be no seamage. Steam usually was a factor in these molds. They were turned with a layer of steam so they wouldn't bang against and stay warm. Definitely, they would not be in a cold mold. That would cause whittling, and while you're turning the bottle in a turn mold and it's cold, you're going to get a real bad rippling effect. I have a bottle that has that problem, but it's still alive, so I guess it didn't really impede its structural value. But yeah, turn mold, a lot of little bubbles in it, and this is the kind of label that would go on to this. This is a mineral Springs water bottle, and Springs didn't put a lot of money into their bottled water. They made a lot of money on actually people going to the spring and hanging out there in the clean water. But they did bottle it to make an extra buck, and these would be the type of bottle. And again, I sort of distressed the bottle. This was just printed, off the internet. My printer was acting up and even added those stripes. But the color is good, and it works on the proper bottle. So the main thing to keep in mind here is keep the label true to the product that it is representing. You don't want to put, a bluing label on a beer bottle per se, but that's not to say they may have done that back in the past. I have found labels on whiskey bottles that said they were bluing bottles or cleaning agents. I mean, stealing bottles were the big deal back in the old days, and that's why so many of them took the extra time to emboss their bottles so they could not be mistaken or reused for something else or somebody else's product. Scott's Emulsion put money out to make these bottles for them, and although they may have not were returned back to the company, they were advertisement for the company. The more of these you found laying around, the more you realize that must be a good product, I better buy it. And that's why embossing was very important in the early days. Now, I'm not a can collector, although I find cans. This is the only label that you really can't fudge. I mean, this is in great condition considered. I dug this out of the ground. There were tons of them. I hit a big mound of... It even gives you the illustration of how to use a can opener. That was novel back then, and you can see there's just one opening it. But you can't fudge this. This is something that if it hasn't been put in a closet and left there for years and years and never been touched, or it's been a collection right off the bat, which back then are highly unlikely. Cans were competing with bottles, so there was an animosity sometimes toward the bottler who also keg-lined a can and put it out. Beer was the major thing. Beer was the product that went into cans in the beginning, and beverage cans. I mean, there was cans, of course, and green beans were canned since the 1840s, but this metal can, and this is Kruger, the first company to actually put cans out with beer. That's what I was told anyway. Whether that's true or not, there might be debate, but I think Kruger were. 1934, this can dates back to, so that goes back a while, and it's a great can for what how I dug it in the middle of nowhere in a giant pile of these things. I have a few more. This is the best example for just a dug can, just out of the ground, washed with a hose and water and got the sand out of it, and that's what it was saved it, I think. It was in sand. It was on the coast of Jersey where sand is prevalent, and it was in a giant hole with thousands of these. 2/3 of them were rotted and not usable or looked at, you couldn't tell what they were. But the center core of them, and because unfortunately I wasn't a can person, which I still am not, I didn't take advantage and take at least half a dozen out, because this is believe it or not, very valuable even in its condition, this Kruger's. There you go. Little tootle about putting labels on otherwise worthless, uncollectible bottles. Now, one other note. To do this, to put the label on, I do it in a very primitive way, but you can do it any way you want. You can use stick pens, although I don't think a glue pen and the glue quality is good. I use Elmer's glue. I have a piece of cardboard on my art table here, and then what I do is I'll cut out the label. I'll stress it out if I have to first off, and then I'll apply a thin layer of Elmer's on the back of the page. You have to be very careful, but just use your finger so you got the whole label covered with Elmer's. It's pretty clean glue, so I wouldn't worry about it. Wash your hand. You have time to do that. Wash your fingers, and then come back, put the label on your lap, put the bottle in your lap, and gingerly apply it to the bottle. You don't want to have any glue smears on your glass. So there you go, and it's 17 minutes too long. A little fun fact about extending your hobby to making a useless bottle useful again. Bye.